Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my winter reads wrap-up and talking about my top 5 books that I read in the months of December, January, and February. I do have my dogs here with me today, so they might pop in and out of this video. My seasonal wrap-ups are some of my favorite videos to make because I love looking through the last 3 months of reading and figuring out what were my favorites out of all of those things that I read. Looking at it 3 months at a time really gives you more perspective, and I really like that. So the way that I usually do this is different from my monthly wrap-up. So in my monthly wrap-ups, I like to go in the order that I read the books, but by the time I get to my seasonal wrap-up, I like to do them by rating. So I'll start with my lowest rated books all the way up to my top 5 books that I read. As usual, I'll have a bunch of timestamps down in the description box so that you can jump to the parts of the video that you are most interested in hearing about. So I have to say that winter was an amazing reading season for me. Half of the books that I read I gave 5 stars. At first that kind of worried me because it made me wonder, am I going too easy on these books? Is it too easy for something to be a favorite? But I really rate things based on my enjoyment of them. And I think that I am a fairly critical reader. So I don't know, I was a little self-conscious about the fact that I had so many 5-star reads in the past 3 months. But in the end, I've just come to the conclusion that I picked some really good books and I know my taste. I would much rather be reading things that I enjoy and give 5 stars over reading things that I don't enjoy. I mean, do I really want to be a more critical reader or read more things that I don't enjoy as much just so I can have a bell curve of ratings? No. I decided no, I would rather just enjoy things. The other day I saw one of Sylvia from Wish Fulfillment's videos. She mentioned that she doesn't want to read any 3-star books. She wants to only read 4- and 5-star books for the rest of her life. And I thought that sounded amazing and is definitely a philosophy that I believe in. Okay, so that was quite the rant, but basically I had a really good reading season and my total counts of ratings worked out like this. I had 1 2-star read, 2 3-star reads, 3 4-star reads, and I had 6 5-star reads, which of course comes out to reading 12 books within the last 3 months. So real quick, I'm just going to go over all the books that I read and their ratings without really going into descriptions or synopses. The only 2-star read that I had in the last 3 months was Keeper by Kim Chance, which was an e-arc that I received from NetGalley. Thank you to the publishers for a free book in exchange for an honest review, and I'm sorry I didn't like it very much. I'm also really sorry to Kim Chance because I like Kim Chance as a author tuber and I hope that she has a lot of success, but the book just wasn't for me. And then I had 2 3-star reads, which were Hagseed by Margaret Atwood and The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. My 3 4-star reads were The Isle of Blood by Rick Yancey, which is the 3rd book in the Monstrumologist series, Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind, which is the 1st book in the Sword of Truth series, and then most recently Jane Unlimited by Kristen Cashore. Now we're gonna get into my top 5 favorite reads. And you might be thinking, but Jade, you said you had 6 5-star reads. How are they all gonna be in your top 5? This is my channel and I make the rules. 2 of the books were in the same series, so I'm counting them as 1 book. So technically I'm gonna be talking about 6 books, but in my mind they're my top 5 reads. Those 2 books in one series that I just mentioned were The Queen of the Tearling and Invasion of the Tearling. I read both of these in December. I binged them. I listened to them on audio. They had different narrators. I talked a lot about their narrators in my best and worst audiobooks of 2017 video, so definitely go check that out if you're interested on my thoughts on those specific narrators. But either way, I really enjoyed both of these books. One of the reasons I love the Queen of the Tearling series is because it's kind of a genre bender. It feels very much like a high fantasy, but as you go through the series, you realize it's also a little bit science fiction dystopian. I love the way that Erika Johansen was able to combine those genres seamlessly, in my opinion, and those are my 2 favorite genres. Another thing that I love about the Queen of the Tearling series is that it definitely appeals to me as an older reader. I kind of see it in its own age category that I call new adult. It's not because it's a romance. I mean, there is some romance, but it's not focused on the romance and there's not a lot of explicit content. What I'm more thinking about are the themes that are presented and some of the graphic nature that is described in the book. So I would definitely give some trigger warnings for this series for like sexual abuse and rape. While the content feels more adult, the way that it's written and just the feeling that you get from it feels a lot more like YA in the sense that you feel really close to the characters, and there's a sense of immediacy that I think is part of what defines YA as a genre. And I think that's a newer thing that authors are starting to explore. I just finished reading Reign the Earth by A.C. Gauguin, and I had very similar thoughts about that book as well. Okay, so that was a bit of a tangent. Basically, this series does a few things that I think are different from typical YA fantasies, and I really enjoyed those things. I do want to warn people that it is a slow building series. It's very politics heavy, and it's also fairly character focused and not really like action packed, so definitely set your expectations appropriately before going into the series. I haven't read the last book. I hear the last book is fairly polarizing, so I'm definitely interested to see what I think of the series as a whole once I finish it. From what I read so far, the first 2 books, they were both 5 stars. I love them. I think the series is fresh and new and interesting, and it's definitely something I would recommend. Okay, so my next 5-star read was also in December. I had a really good reading month in December, and that was Salt to the Sea by Ruta Septys. This was my second Ruta Septys book. This ended up on my best books of 2017. Ruta Septys has become one of my new favorite authors, and I'm excited to read more of her in the future. So this book, similar to her other popular book, Between Shades of Grey, is set in the World War II era, so it's a YA historical fiction set during the World War II time period. This one is about a group of people who are traveling to flee into Germany, and they board this boat that ends up sinking. This is a maritime disaster that happened in real life, in history, but it's not a disaster that is like widely known. What I learned is that more people died in this boat sinking than even on the Titanic, which was like mind-blowing to me. The story is told from like 5 different perspectives, and they all intertwine. While it's definitely emotional, it's also just a really great story. I loved it so much. I definitely recommend it if you like World War II fiction at all. What I also love about Ruta Septys is at the end of both of the books that I've read so far, she has a pretty lengthy author note, and she goes into detail about why she wrote it, what her inspirations were, who she interviewed, all that kind of stuff. And I always just find it so interesting and inspiring to hear her talk about how the book came to be. My next 5-star read was in January, and that was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. It did take me quite a long time to actually finish this book, but it wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it. I really loved every second of reading The Final Empire. I'm familiar with Brandon Sanderson's work. I've read at least 1 or 2 of the Wheel of Time books that he wrote. After that, I went on to read the first book or 2 in another one of his series that I can't remember the name of right now. So I had an idea of what to expect as far as Brandon Sanderson's writing style and world building. A lot of people describe The Final Empire as being a heist story, and I think that kind of set me up for some incorrect expectations. When I think a heist story, I think something that's super action-packed and fast-paced, and I didn't find that to be true for The Final Empire. It was definitely a slower build, but it's a slow build to some amazing awesomeness. Brandon Sanderson really does a lot of world building and character building, but not in an info dumpy way that leads you to the climax of the story, and then it's like plot twist after plot twist after action scene after action scene. Like the whole last quarter almost of the book is just nonstop exciting stuff. So while it is a bit of a slow build, it's totally worth it. And I guess I would describe this book more as a group of misfits that are planning a revolution over planning a heist. And I think that description kind of encompasses how big of a heist they're doing. It's not just like they're trying to steal one thing. It's a lot bigger than that. So that's why I would rather say that it's about a group of people who are trying to pull off a revolution. If you like adult high fantasy, or if you want to get into adult high fantasy, I would definitely recommend The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series. I really enjoyed it, and I am super looking forward to continuing the series. The next 5-star read that I had was in February, and that was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This was a book that I picked up for my work book club. I was really excited to read it because I have been wanting to read it for a long time. It finally won our book club voting. This book has been quite popular, so you probably have already heard of it, but it is an adult sci-fi thriller. It's about this guy, Jason. One night he gets kidnapped and drugged and knocked out, and when he wakes up, his life isn't what it used to be. His wife isn't his wife anymore, and their son that they had doesn't exist. And the rest of the book is about him trying to figure out how and if he can get his old life back. I thought this book was so action-paced. It's definitely very consumable and easy to read. It's something that I would recommend to people who aren't really into reading. I think it's something that is easy for non-readers to like, if that makes sense. At the same time, it can be a little heavy on the science, so I would warn off people who really aren't into science fiction because it might be a little too sciencey for you. But at the same time, I would say give it a try and see what you think. What I liked about this book was not only was it an action-packed, fast-paced thriller that was also science fiction, because those are two things that I love, but on top of that, Blake Crouch was still able to really fully flesh out his characters and create some really good relationships between characters. I loved Jason's relationship with his wife and his relationship with his son. While on the surface this is a action-packed, fast-paced thriller, it still has a lot of depth that I think will appeal to a lot of readers and really makes this book accessible to a lot of people. And then last but not least, my last 5-star read of winter was The Crimson Crown by Cinda Chima. This is the last and final book in the Seven Realms series, which is a 4-book series. I have loved all of the books up to this point. I think I gave the first one 5 stars and then the 2 in the middle 4 stars. This one was back at 5 stars. I can say that I literally enjoyed every single second of this last book. I was savoring it and enjoying it. I love these characters to death. Let me back up real quick. This is a YA high fantasy, and it's about this princess Ruta and this young man named Hans Alistair. Ruta is a princess. She's in line for the throne, and her storyline is about her getting on the throne and learning how to like run her kingdom. And then you have Hans Alistair, who is like a street cat. Is that a term? Street cat? I think so. He grew up on the streets and has been a gang leader, and so he's like a little bit of a bad boy, but he's also like super determined and wants to make a life for himself. There are lots of supporting characters, and there's so much about the series that I love. I love the world, I love the cultures, I love the characters. But as far as this final book, I really loved the way everything tied up together. There was basically nothing about this book that I didn't love. Hans Alistair has definitely cemented a place in my heart as my top book boyfriend. There was so much swooning for me in this book when it came to him. Both his and Race's character arcs throughout the whole series is just like amazing. I was a huge fan of the way things wrapped up and ended. I loved it, and I'm definitely excited to pick up the later series that takes place in the same world, but like, I don't know, 20-something years later. I'm not going to start it yet. I'm going to let this series kind of marinate in my mind for a little bit, and as you probably know, I'm trying to wrap up series, so starting a new series is not part of that plan. I don't know how long I can resist starting the next series, but I'm gonna try to resist. Okay guys, so those are all 12 of the books that I read in December of 2017 and then January and February of 2018. If you have read any of these books, leave your thoughts about them down in the comment sections. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like bookish content. I post 1 to 2 times a week. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye. Hello. As usual, I like to do it in the order of, I like to do them in the order of read. I like to do them by, so I have to say that my is part of that in my his life isn't what it used to be. His mom. Bye. Okay.